we're really looking at helping that family, that caregiver, set up that care plan. What are some things they need to think about? What are some things they might need to do?
Ms. Pam. Topic today, early warning signs and next steps. Now, the Alzheimer's Association identifies, is it 10?
10.
Okay, can we just review those real quick?
We can. I don't know them by heart, so if I glance at my notes, I don't want to forget them. The first one is memory loss that disrupts daily life, and that's very important. We'll talk about that later. Challenges in planning or solving problems, difficulty completing familiar tasks, confusion with time and place, trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships, new problems with words or speaking, misplacing things, and the inability to retrace our steps. That's another one too, unfortunately, we notice quite a bit. Decreased or poor judgment, withdrawal from social activities, isolation, that's another one. And then lastly, changes in mood and personality.
Okay. Can we kind of do not necessarily a deep dive, but let's go a little bit underneath the surface on each one. So let's just go back and do the 10.
Okay.
And let's just kind of deep dive a little bit on it or scratch the surface, and so people have a little bit better idea, a little bit more context.
Absolutely, Mark. So the first thing that I would say is that the second most frequent question that I get asked out when I'm out speaking and talking with folks is, how do I know the difference? Like, what's a normal sign of aging? What could be a sign of oncoming dementia or Alzheimer's disease? And so a lot of these things that we're going to talk about here in the next few minutes, you could see also as a normal part of aging. So I'll try to point out the difference when we talk about each one, the things that you might look for that might give you cause for concern about, is this dementia or, moving into dementia. The other thing I'll say, Mark, is that we talk about 10 warning signs, but you might only notice one. You may notice 5 or 6 of them, but you only have to notice one to, maybe think about, talking to the physician or doctor or whatever. So let's start with the first one, which is memory loss that disrupts daily life. And that's really the key on this one, is the disruption of daily life. So these are things that people forget that you wouldn't necessarily think that they should or would forget. Somebody's name that's very close to them, spouse or child, a birthday, an anniversary, a place, where they shop, where they get groceries, where they go to church. Just that memory loss, and the loss is gone. They don't really can recover that memory. We'll talk about that a little bit later in some of the other warning signs.
Well, real quick is just to help identify that, is it one of those things where it's a just complete lack to connect, or is it one of those things where you're like, that person, what's her name?
Right. So that's a great example, Mark. So for you and I, we're going to be there like, oh, I know that person. It's Mark. Someone who's having different changes in their brain, they're not going to be able to pull Mark out. They're going to continue to kind of be in that stutter stop mode of, I feel like I should know that, but I don't. Mm-hmm. I can't recall that memory. So,
like, if that, do you want to look for a pattern in that, or like, boom, first time, like that's something you should be on the lookout for. Like the first time they don't do it or they're not able to pull from it, boom, I need to take some kind of action.
Yeah, that is a great question. And that is another real key when you're observing these changes in your loved one. Is there a pattern? You know what? You and I, we forget people's names. We forget where we leave stuff. We try to recall that memory. The difference is that you and I more than likely will recall it and remember it. A lot of times I always say when my mind relaxes, that's when I'll remember something. And we all forget. We all have those lapses. But you're definitely looking for that pattern, that consistency of, wow, I noticed that, Mom forgot that last week and she still hasn't remembered that, or we're talking about it and she's forgetting it again. So you definitely, in all of these warning signs and changes, you want to look for those patterns. All right, so number 2, challenges in planning or solving problems. So we kind of call this the executive functioning key. So if you're looking at anything where you have to follow a pattern, a sequence, a recipe, a formula, anything where you're kind of processing, if you're unable to do that, or you experiences just some frustration or changes, or you miss a step or few on something that normally wouldn't be a change for you. For example, we typically will shop at the same grocery store. We'll typically go to the same church. We go to our kids' functions, right? So we're driving in the same places, we're doing the same things, and then all of a sudden we can't remember how do we drive to church? My next door neighbor played in a golf league, and one of her good friends followed her home from the golf course back to her house. And she was sharing with us, I got out of the car and she was like, "Hey, so-and-so, what do you need? Did you forget something? Or what's going on?" Because they typically would go home, right, after the golfing. And she was like, "Hey, I don't remember how to get home." So things like that, that executive processing, paying bills is another one. Just things that, where you're doing stuff in sequence and noticing those changes.
And again, when you see those, like those initial struggles, grab my water here, excuse me.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. So we're looking for the patterns. We're looking for patterns and frequency.
Yeah. How long is this happening? And, there might be some things that are more complex, so, I know for my older parents, just trying to track sometimes their health care and their bills and their deductibles and their, we have trouble with that sometimes. So I think too, think about the complexity of the function too. But something is, my mom and dad have been going to the same church for 60 some years. If they forgot how to get there, I would pay attention to that.
Or a recipe that someone has done forever, or maybe some kind of maintenance that they've done on like the lawnmower or something like that.
Yeah. Something they could do in their sleep. Right.
Got it.
Yeah. And that kind of leads into the next one, difficulty completing familiar tasks. So again, something like, playing bridge, playing gin rummy, a card game, playing something with the grandkids, just doing something that, normally you would just do, how to do, and it's very familiar, something that you do regularly. You think about like the challenges in solving problems, those are things that, come up. Sometimes, like I said, sometimes those things you just kind of monitor because, yeah, that's kind of hard. But this difficulty in doing familiar tasks, I think really would give you pause because it's something that you just do. So many of the things that we do during our day, we don't even hardly think about, right? We just do. Those pathways are developed in our brain. And so you typically will see, they just don't remember how to do something that's very familiar to them.
And it could be, and my brain just popped like hygiene issues, brushing teeth,
Yes.
Shampooing hair, getting dressed,
Taking a shower, any of those things. Absolutely. We've had families that one of the first things that they've noticed is their loved one always is very meticulous in their care. they're showering, applying makeup or cologne or doing their hair, and then the next time they see them, they're just somewhat disheveled, and they're like, that's very, very odd. Does it happen once? Yeah, maybe they just didn't feel good that day, and didn't want to get up and get dressed to the nines. But a pattern of that behavior, oh yeah, I just forgot, or yeah, I'm not really into that today, would give you cause to take a look at that for sure. Confusion with time or place. Think about it. When we're on vacation, we'll be like, hey, what day is it? What's the date? My husband's retired, and many times he'll ask me, what's the date today? Like, he just doesn't track that as much anymore because he's not working and he doesn't necessarily have to be somewhere. But just a generalized confusion of, oh, it's summer already, or school's out, or, oh yeah, the holidays are approaching. Just something that's just a little bit off, a little bit odd, that, you wouldn't, as the holidays approach, or somebody's birthday or graduation or a wedding, and those things are coming up, and we've had them on the calendar for months, and then somebody's just very confused about, oh, what's happening? Who's getting married? Those kinds of things that just, again, a little bit odd, a little bit different kind of behavior for that. As someone who has dementia, Alzheimer's disease, and as the disease progresses, we see this confusion in time in place a lot more frequently. But sometimes this one's a little more subtle at the beginning, because people can cover that. Oh, yeah, that's right. I just forgot, But again, you're looking for those patterns in the behavior.
Yeah. So that would be the way to focus in, again, looking for the patterns and be like, okay, it's not the middle of summer. We shouldn't be thinking about putting up the Christmas tree. Anything that raises your eyebrow, and this is one of those things that, especially this particular topic, time and place. This is one of those things, and correct me if I'm wrong, where loved ones and to be or soon to be caregivers, this is probably an area where frustration occurs a lot. Maybe.
Absolutely, because you think about what happens when you get a little confused. What do? You start asking questions. You start seeking out. And your caregivers are like, yeah, that's been on the calendar. We've talked about that. We just had this conversation. Think about those things that you would say. It's like, we just talked about that yesterday, or, so-and-so called and invited us and you put it on the calendar, and, you're just kind of shaking your head like, what's up? So I think, again, you're looking for those patterns. You're looking for that frequency. How often is this happening? And I think too, when we can get easily frustrated because our expectations are that this is just something you should know. Mm-hmm. And then when our expectations don't get met, right, we get resentful and frustrated. So particularly, I think, for caregivers, and like you said, soon to be caregivers, we've just had this conversation. And I think that's another clue for people in any of these warning signs, when we talk about frequency, is how often have we had this conversation? We've talked about this, and we're talking about it again. And I think that does lead to frustration for folks. It's kind of like our families are when you are truly caregiving for someone, and one of the things your person may do is ask you the same question over and over again. And, I always tell folks, we talked about this the last time, you have to step into their reality and, do some of your other skills, redirect, and try not to get, I just told you the answer to that, we just talked about that. And that's really hard. That is just, it's really hard.
Extremely difficult.
You know that.
It is extremely difficult. And I really sense that subtlety aspect of it that you mentioned earlier is very, very challenging when it comes to this in particular, because when it is subtle at first and it's just kind of like, oh yeah, I forgot, and then you begin to disregard the warning sign.
Yes.
Because you begin to be like, that's normal behavior because they have been forgetting things lately. So what initially was like, we just talked about that. Oh, that's right. And then a couple weeks goes by and things seem fine. And then we just talked about that. Oh, that's right. And when there's that subtlety, it's like the warning sign becomes camouflage, I would think.
Yes, absolutely. Two things going on there. You described the caregiver perfectly. The caregiver becomes just used to it. Absolutely. The other person, though, in that dyad, the person who is experiencing the changes, we know people who are living in the early stage, they share with us that they know something's not right. They know they're having these changes. So I don't want you to know that. I don't want you to think I've got Alzheimer's disease. I don't want you to think I'm getting old. So if you say to me, Pam, we already talked about that. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. I may not have clue one what you're talking about, but I'm going to try to camouflage it, cover it up. Yeah, that's right. I'm sorry. You're right. We talked about that. And so, denial is one of our most powerful coping mechanisms. And if we can, all of us, the caregiver and the person living between, are both in a different form of denial. Yeah, okay, yeah, we talked about that. This is just how she is. And I think that's one of the things that we combat all the time at the association, is that these changes are not normal. These changes are not just, I'm getting old, or grandma's getting old, mom's getting old. It's truly something's changing in the brain.
Yeah, so. And that actually reminds me of something else that I would we may talk about it more, but with all of these things, again, with that subtle onset of some of these things, probably another thing we need to be watching out for are those generic answers to things, these positive generic answers to, I haven't seen you in such a long time. Well, it has. Yes. Mm-hmm. It has. You look great. Mm-hmm. Kind of things. Yeah. Where they're answers, but not specific answers.
Correct.
Going
Absolutely.
to that hiding thing you were talking about.
Yeah. Because some folks are very, very, very good at that. They're very, they can deceive, right? They can camouflage, they can hide. And again, that other person is just, you got to be paying attention. There's some, and so many times the spouse, the significant other that's in the home, they, as you said, they just get used to it. And it takes sometimes the other family members who come in and say, what's wrong with so-and-so, to really kind of shake that up a little bit and push them to really face the issue.
Yeah. And just a shout out to our loved ones and stuff. That's pretty normal.
Very normal.
To begin to incorporate those things.
Absolutely. Yeah. On both sides, right? Because a person who is beginning those changes, they may or may not have any exposure to what mild cognitive impairment or early dementia. They may not have any idea what's happening to them. Some people might have an idea what's happening to them because they've seen it prior in their family. Right? We know this disease travels in families. So if I'm a daughter and I've previously taken care of one of my parents and now I'm beginning to have these changes, absolutely, you can't blame them. Absolutely not. And our caregivers, again, absolutely not. People, I find, Mark, do the very best they can, and with how they're coping and dealing with things. Absolutely.
And just another real quick point on there, and it's just popped in my head that that is something that we have to stay focused on is in identifying these things, is because probably some of that hiding or camouflaging that the individual who's suffering is experiencing is out of this fear that they're going to lock me up. They're going to lock me up. They're going to put me in a nursing home.
Totally. So I'm going to skip a little bit. I'm going to talk about withdrawal from work or social activities, because you gave me a great segue here. If you have someone in your life that is pretty active, pretty social, pretty just, I hate using the word normal, but I'll just say just normal. And then all of a sudden you notice that they start to, I don't really want to go to that. I don't really feel like hanging out with the grandkids. No, I don't really want to go to that church function. You start to see that withdrawal and that social isolation out of someone that's not a pattern of behavior, not like them. I think that's a real clue, because just for the reason that you were talking about, like a person will recognize the changes, and if they don't want to, because I'll tell you, the other thing that we talk about at the association is how exhausting it is for the person who is having these changes in their brain, how exhausting their day is to keep up, to camouflage, to deflect, to make sure that people aren't noticing these changes, because I don't want people to notice these changes, because I don't want anyone to lock me up. So either I have to be like on my game constantly combating this, or I withdraw. I isolate because I'm just tired and I don't want to deal with it anymore. And I unfortunately see this more often than not. A lot of folks will just withdraw because they just don't want to deal with it, and they don't want people coming in and getting in their business. They don't want the kids coming in and taking over their finances. They just don't want to be moved out of their home. And so I'm just going to hunker down. So that's really, I think, a real telltale sign.
Which is also a double-edged sword, because withdrawal means lack of social engagement. It means lack of a variety of stimuli that helps combat the issues.
You better believe it. Yeah. So now you're finding yourself trying to drag that person back out of that isolation. So it's definitely a warning sign and something to watch for. So thanks for letting me skip over that. Skip that one a little bit.
Like I said, this is all free flowing stuff. We just, whatever happens.
Oh. So this one's the trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships is a little, it's a little tougher, I think, because, as we get older, we have issues with our gait, with our balance, with our vision, with our depth perception. I never was a graceful person, but as I get older, I'm even less graceful, And so when folks have these changes in our brains, it's not necessarily that there's problems with their eyesight. It's how what people see is perceived within the brain. So people typically will have trouble with peripheral vision, depth perception, some of those kinds of things. Stepping off this step, and the families will see that typically in driving, distance vision, stuff like that. Most of the time it's in driving. So people are having difficulty driving because there's a lot of executive functioning in driving. Sometimes, excuse me, oh my gosh.
Yeah, take a drink. Come on. Let's relax.
Woo! I don't know what happened there. Sorry about that.
Warm.
It's warm. Thank you.
And we're talking a lot.
New problems with trouble in speaking and writing. No, we're not there yet. So, a typical age-related vision change would be like a cataract, right? So this is different. This is really something that has more to do with the brain processing. So you might see the depth perception, the changes with the vision. And again, these things are a little more subtle, and you may not, unless you're probably living with the person, you may not see some of these changes necessarily. But again, something that is just, you've had somebody who's been a really good driver, and then all of a sudden they're just having trouble navigating behind the wheel. That might be something to really think about with them. Problems with words and speaking. This is typically where there's a couple things that happen, and this is mostly in conversation. So, it,
You all right?
yes, that's it.
Oh,
That's it. So I always do that for impact.
you got yeah.
I got you, didn't I?
Especially because I was writing something.
Yeah, and then you just looked at me. You're just like, oh, goodness.
Did she get you, Matt? Yeah. Okay.
I did my job. But that's a great example of what happens, that people will just stop mid-thought, mid-sentence, and just kind of, I think, particularly if you know them, or sometimes even if you don't, you see that kind of lost look that I really forgot what I was talking about. Now, again, I will tell you, a lot of times my mind is moving faster than my mouth, and I will be talking and I'll forget, but I'll be like, okay, what was I talking about? What train of, I lost my train of thought. A person who begins to experiencing these changes truly loses that train of thought, right? You and I, we could recover that, but our folks won't be able to do that. The other kind of telltale signs you'll see in the conversational speech will be replacement of words. So I might call the table a chair. I might call the spoon a fork. Things like that. And I'll do it without even breaking a sweat. Like, I'll just be like, yeah, you need to move that table over here so I can sit down on it. Like, I don't even get that I'm replacing those words. Sometimes the other thing I think I see and we hear about are people struggling to find the right word. And again, all of us do that. We're like, okay, how do I want to say that? But again, we will eventually be able to complete that conversation, and our loved ones with changes are probably not going to be able to do that. So these are some of the things that you see in conversational speech. Sometimes people will just have a real difficulty writing also. And it depends, we don't do a lot of writing. You're doing a lot of writing right now, but a lot of people are on their screens. So we don't necessarily see that, but you might see something there, with somebody not being able to operate their technology that might be of concern to you. Again, you're looking for frequency and patterns.
And again, this one really jumps out to me as where this is one of those things that we just start automatically doing for our loved one. We end up finishing their sentences for them, and again, it becomes normal to us, or it becomes routine to us, and we become blind to, or the caregiver or loved one becomes blind to the warning sign.
Yes, absolutely. Perfect example of this. My parents had a couple that were friends since high school. So, they've been friends since they were teenagers. And the husband had Alzheimer's disease, but their friends, they never talked about it. This generation didn't talk about stuff, right? They're not ones that are sharing these things. And so they were at dinner one night, and you know how the gentleman will retire to the study for the cigars and the ladies will go to the kitchen. They didn't separate. He stayed with her. And, my mom, everyone thought that's kind of weird. Like, why is he with there? That's kind of weird. And he went into the kitchen with her. Like, she didn't go where the, men were. He came into the kitchen with her, and my mom was like, well, all right, whatever. But it was then during that conversation that my mom noticed that if he was talking, if someone did ask him something, he would get to a certain point and he'd look at his wife and she would finish his sentence. And, my mom was just like, he's just off. That was just very odd. And, a few other things in that relationship, but they finally shared the diagnosis. But,
and
that happens.
And it just reminded me, because of my own journey, when you kind of realize you don't even, and this is this thing where that's one of the things that you don't even necessarily realize that you're doing it, because I remember when my mom was asked by the doctor, what month is it? And then my mom looks at me for help. Right. You can just tell by the look, and it was excruciating to see her look at me like that. Yeah. Looking to me for the answer, and in that moment I couldn't give it to her, and it is extremely difficult. And I didn't even realize that I like I said, I didn't notice how much I had been doing it myself until there was a situation where I was not allowed to, because like I found myself ready to say, oh, it's December, Mom. It's just very simple. Sure. I had to stop myself from my own automatic reaction of doing that. And yeah, it's sneaky. It's sneaky stuff.
Mm-hmm. And again, that's one of the more common signs as well. When they're looking to you to fill in those blanks for them. Yeah.
Real quick.
Yeah.
Let's just stop and talk about that for a minute. Since we've got this real life example here, it's okay to do that as long as you're recognizing it's a warning sign and it is something that is an actionable item. We're not saying don't do those things, correct?
Correct.
We're saying recognize those things.
Correct.
Still support your loved one.
Absolutely.
But take action.
Absolutely. You have to look at where you're at with that, okay? So you described you described your experience. You were in the doctor's office. So you've already worked past the point where you're like, you and your brothers were, hey, something's going on with Mom. Something's going on. You've already got her in the physician's office. The physician needs a clean slate, so to speak, to really assess her and figure out what's going on. So no, he won't want you to support and answer questions at that moment in time. But what have we said before? When you're the caregiver, the family member, the spouse, your person can't change. She doesn't know what month it is. She's asking you, what month is it? You're going to step into her reality and answer that question and provide that love and support for her. Absolutely. Absolutely. And even on the earlier side of that, before you went into the doctor, you're thinking, oh man, or you could be thinking, oh man, something's going on with Mom. Yeah, Mom, it's December. I mean, you're being kind. You're being a good son. You're being a good spouse, whatever. You're supporting your person, but you're also, like you said, you're being wise. You're like, okay, there might be something going on here. What else is happening? So yes, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, for sure.
And there's no guilt when you realize it maybe a little bit later than you should have, because it's just normal.
Okay. Hindsight's always 20/20, yeah. Right? So no, you can't beat yourself up. People are very, very good at covering and hiding and all these things that they do. And, something we're going to talk about in a minute is that Okay, so voila, we've identified that mom's got 5 warning signs, and we need to do something about it. I'm gonna tell you, sometimes mom doesn't want to do anything about it, right? We're gonna talk about that in a minute. Um, this is another very, very common one we're going to talk about here. And I get asked about this one a lot when I'm out speaking, and that is misplacing things and then being unable to retrace your steps to find them. So we always use the example of car keys, right? We misplace our car keys. There is a particular place in my house where when I come in, I put my car keys, because the next time I need them, I'm going to go there. They're going to be there. And I'm not wasting my time looking for my keys. You could replace anything in this equation, not just keys, but this is the most common one. And, I go to that place, they're not there. Oh, crap. Okay, where did I leave my keys? Okay, they could be on my desk. They could be in one of the thousands of bags I carry. They could be on the kitchen table. When's the last time I had my keys? Oh, yeah, I went to Bowling Green. Okay, what did I do after that? So I'm sequentially moving backwards to figure out where I left my keys. And honestly, this is embarrassing, but the last time I lost or misplaced my car keys, I found them on the floor in my car on the passenger side, because they had fallen out of one of my many humongous bags.
I don't think you can put that on you.
So that's the difference. I was able to retrace my steps and figure out whatever it is that I misplaced, where it was. A person living with dementia or seeing those changes, they're starting those, having the impairment, they would have looked at the keys on the floor in the car and would have said something like, well, who put my car keys here? How did my car keys get here?
Or someone hid my keys.
Someone hid my keys. Have you been hiding my keys again? And they just, and it can be anything. It can be your wallet. It could be an ingredient you're looking for to cook with. Anything that they've misplaced that they can't find, and they're unable to retrace steps to find it. That is a huge clue and warning sign for people, and that is a little bit more common.
And again, this one is one of those subtle ones, and extremely frustrating. Mm-hmm. Extremely frustrating. My thought process with it is like, let frustration be a red flag. Mm-hmm. Let frustration to be a red flag for you. If you are getting frustrated in areas that you have not gotten frustrated historically, mm-hmm. that's a red flag. Yeah. And in terms of that frustration, I know we're talking about the warning signs, but when those things happen, there are products out there where you can put little tags on things, put them on your keys, put them on your remote controls, right, so they make little beep sounds. Right. It'll help. That's all I'm saying, is it'll help.
So for caregivers, you just got some great tips from Mark.
Just a little extra.
Little extra there because I think that, and Mark also, that's really valuable on this side of the diagnosis, right? When you have those warning signs, but it's also a great strategy on the other side, because, we know that over 80% of people who are diagnosed and live with dementia, or some who are not even diagnosed but are living with dementia, are living at home. Mm-hmm. And so that's a great idea for caregivers to, we also know that 6 out of 10 people wander. So if you've got a person that's wandering, something like that to help you figure out where they might be, where their stuff might be, absolutely great idea.
Well, and just like you said, the just in general, if you can decrease the frustration on both sides, yep, caregiver and loved one, it's just a better quality of life, and it's management of of what is this disease, and it just increases the quality of life on both sides. So.
I agree. Would totally agree. Couple more. We'll finish up. Decreased or poor judgment, and again, these are things like we typically see. The decision making. The decision making is just, you're just shaking your head. A lot of times, our families will find this poor decision making in financial decisions. So, maybe you happen to see some mail on the table and you see a collection notice. And you're like, my dad pays his bills every month. I mean, like, there's just what's happening here. And dad's forgotten to pay a bill. Or dad's like, well, we don't have cable TV. What? I'm not paying this bill. When indeed they do. Or it could be the other extreme where they pay the same bill 3 times in 1 month. Same bill, they're paying 3 times. So a lot of times there may be other, poor decisions going on, but a lot of times families will first see this evidence in the financial decisions. So just anything that just, again, seems very odd or out of the ordinary in any kind of decision making. And then the last one is that change in mood and personality. And you mentioned it just a minute ago, that frustration. You might begin to see huge frustration in your loved one because they're struggling to keep up. They're tired. They're fighting that, where did I put this? What am I doing today? What's on the calendar? What day is it? Who is that? This takes a lot of energy. I walked in here today, you're like, hey, Pam, hi, Mark, and we're just on about it. A person living with dementia, they have to expend so much energy. Okay, that's Mark. I'm here to record a program. I need to do X, Y, and Z to get there. That causes frustration. Maybe they're really tired. Just a change in their affect. I mean, that's just something that is, again, it's just out of the ordinary. Maybe your person is just really easygoing, and all of a sudden they are just hyper. Or typically unfortunately, we don't see people who are kind of gruffy become all nicey. We typically will see people, go the other way just because they're tired and frustrated. And what's happening to me?
Yeah, and this, I mean this with all due respect, it's like a version of hangry. Mm-hmm. It's, yes. It's literally their system inside is suffering. Yep. And that anger and frustration or gruffness, or that's, I just think I use that term because I think that's something everyone can identify with.
Absolutely. Hangry. You better believe it. I was hangry yesterday. I think too, this is where we see the depression. So if I'm very early on, I'm noticing some changes, I might go over here to my iPad and what does this mean? What's happening to me? And I might read about Alzheimer's disease, which is progressive, fatal, no cure. This is what I have. So I might become very depressed. I might give up. I deny. I mean, that's the most powerful. But a person may also become more anxious. I mean, I think it's just the isolation, that withdrawal. You may see a lot of different things here that are just very abnormal or very out of the unusual for your person.
Now, and this is also one, especially like you said, if you have someone who usually has a very sunny disposition, all of a sudden becoming angry, confrontational, again, obviously a red flag. But as the loved one, as the family member, this is one where you have to watch out that the fists don't come up. That it's like, you're not going to talk to me that way. it's like, whoa, wait a minute. And again, it's natural. It's natural, but this is again one of those areas where if we cannot identify it as a warning sign, we take it personally.
Yes.
And we react personally.
Yes, we do. Very normal. That's very, of course you do. Why wouldn't you? You know? And so that's where, you know, part of my why is making sure that people are educated and understand what they could potentially be dealing with, and just have that knowledge that, you know, it's hard not to take it personally, but it really may have nothing to do with you. It's what's happening in the person's brain. You know, we tell people on the other side of the diagnosis, as they're learning what the new normal is and to try to plan for the future and what behavior and communication and changes are going to happen, that, you know, you don't know what to expect. It could be different every day. You just have to understand that it's the disease. It's not the person. But it's hard. It's hard. Of course you're going to take it personally. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Those are all the points?
That's all 10.
Okay, a couple follow-ups since we touched on all of them. I do all those things. So, again, let's just reiterate the difference between just a day, lack of sleep, stress,
we
versus
didn't talk about those two things. Yes.
and they all jump in there.
They do.
They are in the top 10 brain habits, though.
Yes, they are.
Decreased stress, plenty of rest.
Get plenty of rest.
And but in all seriousness, it's we're having this conversation right now. I'm recognizing that I do those things. I know that I have a loved one, my mother, who is experiencing Alzheimer's and dementia. I know that it's part of the family history as well. There's a certain level of anxiousness that I have just having this conversation right now, having as much experience that I've had up to this point with things like this. I'm even more sensitive to, is there something wrong with me? So again, can we just kind of just do an overview of what is healthy observation and what is the difference between the two?
Everything that we've talked about in the last few minutes, people who are not having changes in their brains related to dementia, we all experience that at one time or another. We're hangry, we're stressed, lack of sleep. That's another good one. Things come up, stresses come up in our lives. We all forget things. We all misplace things. We all get moody. What? Yeah. We all do that. The difference is a person who's having these changes in their brains, it's going to happen more often, because we know that dementia is a progressive disease. We know that the changes occur 15 to 20 years in the brain before we get a diagnosis. We're looking for patterns, frequency, things that are just odd, that are off. I think after a while, that particularly if it's a spouse that's living with someone, you just realize that that memory of whatever that is just isn't there anymore. And that's your red flags. That's your warning signs. That's what you really want to pay attention to. And, you know, the people that live with you, interact with you on a frequent basis, they're going to notice changes. So, you know, I think, again, people, not you personally, you and people educate themselves about what's happened to their loved one. What does this look like? What could it mean for me as a person in their family? You know, we have an opportunity to go get a blood test now that may help us in that diagnostic path. You could, there's things that you can do, but it's mostly thinking about what's happening to me, and that education about what to look for. And should I get upset if I forget something now and then? Probably not. But if you do have it in your family, and we know that family is one of the risk factors, I think being aware, understanding what you're dealing with, having that knowledge is important, but it shouldn't control your life and drive you crazy if you forget something.
A couple things I want to follow up on that. The concept of proximity popped in my brain. Is that this is probably most effective to identify warning signs in a team environment, so to speak.
Yes.
It's like, hey, I'm the loved one. Look, I'm here all the time. I'm noticing these things. And then on the flip side, it's like, I'm an outside observer. I'm noticing this, and you're finishing their sentences all the time, or these other things, and so to it really is a two-way street in some of those situations. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. I'll go back to my friend, my next door neighbor, who her friend came home after golf. It was interesting because my next door neighbor said, and I also knew this lady. She lived in our neighborhood as well before they moved. And she said, I said, well, what did you do other than get her home? Get her taken care of it. And she said, I told her husband what had happened. And he said, yeah, I've been noticing blah, blah, blah. So it is important for those observers to speak up, because you might be noticing this, and you might be noticing this over here, and the spouse or the person maybe who lives with them is noticing this. And it's like, geez, you know what? We can't deny this anymore. Something is happening, and we need to take the next step.
Okay, so speaking of next steps, I'm not sure. Can I just call the Alzheimer's Association and say, this is what my loved one's experiencing? What do you suggest? What do you recommend?
Absolutely, call us. We'll tell you what to do. We'll help you figure out a solution to that issue. Yes.
You actually do consultations, correct?
We actually do care consultations, and you can call us directly at our office, and one of us will respond, or we have our 24/7 helpline. And we also have counselors and helpline staff there who also can walk you through that. So let's say you're just like, something happened and it's Saturday afternoon, and you really want an answer now, or you really are at the point where I really need to, now's the time, right? You can call the helpline and we can take care of that now. Or you can talk to us and we can talk to you from the office as well.
Okay, so let's demystify what a consultation is. Let's demystify what those, because fear, denial, all of those things are real, and I don't want to call because, quite frankly, I'm afraid of what the answer is. If I call, am I going to have to do X, Y, and Z? Does this mean that, again, the locked up thing is, or they're going to put me away kind of thing? So let's demystify what a care consultation is, so people are 100% comfortable with calling either the 24/7 line or setting up a more
Something local.
something local. Yeah.
Okay. So first of all, just know that we have people calling us for all kinds of things. So it might seem like very scary to you and whatever, but we're very well trained. This is our work, our passion. So our goal is to, when we are done with that conversation, our goal is to make sure that you have the information you need. First of all, it's completely confidential. It's completely free. We're not going to tell you what to do, but we're going to provide some options, some possible solutions, education. Sometimes people will call and say, well, we heard about such and such and such and such. And we can say, yes, we'll get you linked up with them. Or here's somebody to call. Or depending on what the issue is. A lot of times people start out with, they just want some education. They just want to know what's coming. What should we do? I will tell you that for us, any type of we're not a crisis line, so we're more focused on education, future planning. Although, depending on how the conversation goes, a lot of times I will address any safety concerns, like right up front. So, safety for the person and the caregiver is important. Education is important. Do you need help getting the person to the doctor? That's another this is going to shock you, Mark, but most people don't want to go into the doctor and get a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah. And to that point, this conversation that you have with them, it's not a diagnosis, it's directions.
Right.
It's directions
Absolutely.
that they can go.
Yeah. Here's some suggestions. So we have, we call them tip sheets. We have tip sheets on everything. We have a tip sheet on how to have that conversation with your loved one. On getting them to the doctor. We have a tip sheet on, once you get to the doctor, here's the things that we might suggest you ask the doctor. So we're really looking at a care plan is a familiar term to most people. So we're really looking at helping that family, that caregiver, set up that care plan. What are some things they need to think about? What are some things they might need to do? I always say, when I'm talking to my staff and other people, that sometimes people need to talk to somebody they're not related to, right? That they just, I have one family that I've worked with for almost the whole time I've been at the association. And it's the story of, there are 5 siblings, but one sibling is the one that's carrying the backpack. And so we talk about, with her, we talk about how maybe she unloads some of those pieces of the backpack on some of the other siblings. And so there's all kinds of family dynamics that we can help sort through, getting the care plan, getting those resources, getting that education. And we're just going to provide those things. We're not going to tell you what to do. It's not about you should or you need to. Here's what you could do. Here's some resources. And it's not always a one and done. Hey, you want to go, sometimes we'll give a lot of stuff because people have a lot of questions, and I'll be like, go home, process this, talk to your other family members, think about this. You can call us back. We can set up a time 3 weeks down the road and get together again. It's always not necessarily one and done. Or this family that I work with, they'll call with some questions, we'll get them situated, and then I might not hear from them again for maybe another 6-7 months. But we know this is a progressive disease. The needs may change. That first phone call, you may not be able to anticipate everything you're going to need. That's why we're here for you ongoing.
So let's scratch the surface a little bit about that blood test that you mentioned too.
Yeah.
Can you describe that?
Yeah. So it just recently was approved by the FDA earlier this year.
And this is the year 2025.
And this is 25. So this is just earlier this year was approved. It's a blood biomarker test, and what it does is it's specific for Alzheimer's disease, because in Alzheimer's disease there is a buildup of beta amyloid protein in the brain. So this blood test looks for that protein, that abundance of protein in the blood. If a person has that increase in the blood test shows that it does, the Alzheimer's Association and many of the great minds in this field have said, that's great, that's a great clue, but it's not a standalone diagnosis. So just like many times when you go get your blood sugar checked and your blood sugar is sky high, that doesn't necessarily mean you have diabetes, right? It's not in a vacuum, but it is it is invasive, but less invasive less costly and certainly quicker way to help some people understand, am I at risk of this? Or do I have it? And so they're recommending that you take the results of that blood test, and then the physician will work you up in different ways to get to that diagnosis. But it's definitely a game changer. It's a step in the right direction, and will really add to what we are always beating our drum about, which is early detection, early diagnosis. Get it caught early, so you have the potential to intervene for treatment.
And just briefly, since you brought that up, really, what are the benefits of that early detection?
The biggest benefit now is, well, there's lots of benefits. Prior to a couple of years ago, when the biggest benefit now is that we have 2 medications that treat the underlying cause of the disease. They don't cure it, but they treat the underlying cause. First time this has happened. 2 medications. Those medications have to be given in the early stages. So, huge benefit there. The other benefit of early diagnosis is the knowledge and helping the person and the family plan for the future. Because so many times when the person is not diagnosed, or it just progresses quickly and families have to make decisions, it's really hard because they don't know what their person might have wanted. They're not in capacity to make those decisions anymore. It's just tough. I promised Dad I'd never put him in a nursing home. Well, Dad is too much for you to handle at home, right? So it's those kinds of things. So it's that planning. But really, truly now it is more of the fact that we actually have a treatment that could potentially impact that person.
And that blood test is something you could just request from your doctor.
So it's becoming more mainstream. We're very early on, even though we're in 2025, it's very early on. I would imagine that it will get easier and easier to go in and request that blood test. I think that for right now, it's definitely being used in clinical trials, and we will begin to see it filter out into the broader population. I'm not sure 100% that that's happened yet. And then there's that issue of who's paying for it, and all of those fun things that come behind the new stuff.
That's what I say puts the in fun.
Yes.
But it's a reality.
It's a reality.
And we'll talk about all that stuff at some point as well. The last thing that I want to touch on with these 10 signs is to look, these signs are going to be exhibited by the person that you love. Mm-hmm. And it's heartbreaking, it is frustrating, and it is scary. Can you please talk to the point that it's not the person, it's the disease?
Yeah. You just said it. It is the disease. It is not the person. We are unable to control the changes that are happening in our brains. Now, we also know that the 10 healthy habits reduce our risk and have a great positive impact on prevention. So there are things that we can do, and we know that through the science. There are things that we can do to prevent the disease, perhaps delay the onset, and reduce our risk. But at the same time, we don't get into our brains and we don't turn those screws, and we just can't do that. So when this happens to us, it happens to us. And unfortunately, which is the devastating piece about this disease, is that you lose that person as you once knew them. And, sometimes you get introduced to a new person and you learn things about them. And other times you just don't understand where that person went. They just sort of disappear. It's the disease. It's not the person. And it's really hard when you're a 24/7 caregiver and the person is asking you the same question minute after minute, or they're doing something that is not safe and you have to redirect them again and again, or they get up during the middle of the night and wander and you have to get up and get them back to bed. You have to, for as tired as they get, you get even more tired because you are doing whatever. And even if it's determined that perhaps a memory care or a more supervised living arrangement is important, the caregiver still has a lot of responsibilities for that. And so it's just different. But it's always really important to remember that it's the disease talking, what they're doing, how they're acting or not acting. And it's hard. It's hard for the caregiver to remember that.
It is, and I swear I always think that looking through something from a different lens or rephrasing or reframing things really, it doesn't solve it, but it does make it a little bit more helpful when you're like, okay, this disease is like asking someone with a broken arm to carry 2 suitcases.
That's a great analogy. Yeah. Which they can't do.
Which they cannot do.
They cannot do.
They cannot do.
They can't physically do it.
Yeah, and you can't get mad at the person because their arm is broke.
Correct.
It's
So
like,
why are you going to get mad at them because they can't remember what day it is? Because they can't. Just like with the arm is broken, they can't carry the heavy load.
and let's just be honest, that's what makes this disease so difficult, is because it manifests itself through someone that you love.
Yes. Sure does.
Anything else that you want to touch on that we have not touched on, considering this topic?
No, because I think when we get Dr. Lee, we can talk more about getting the person to the doctor. Because that's the other piece of the 10 warning signs is having that conversation. But I think that would be a great thing to incorporate in that.
Well,
if you want to.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm glad you said that, because that does make me have another question. Again, it goes back to that demystifying the phone call to the Alzheimer's station or your doctor. It's like, you're still in control. The association, your doctors are going to give you options. Mm-hmm. And a diagnosis is not 99.999% of the time not an immediate sentence of some kind, whether it be lockup, a death sentence, or anything. Like you said, there are some people that call you here and it's not for another few months that they'll talk to you. Right. What can you say to people to kind of just let them take a breath about taking some kind of action when they do identify these 10 signs?
Okay. I think the important thing to remember is that when you identify these signs, and now we know there's a bit of a urgency to get a diagnosis if you're early on because you have the potential for treatment. Okay, so there is that urgency there. Now, unfortunately, what a lot of people tell us is that there's still a long wait to get into the physician to see them to get the diagnosis. And, we all as a society need to continue to work with that. I think once a diagnosis is made and once that everybody takes a breath and it's like, all right, this is definitive. This is what we have. We have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. What are we going to do now? What do we do now? And a lot of times people will tell us that they don't really get a whole lot of information from their provider at that point in time. And so that's where that call to us is important. Because here's the thing. You may or may not have to do something immediately. If your person is early on and there's an opportunity for treatment, you want to have that conversation with your doctor, and your doctor, I think our physicians are becoming more and more aware of the treatments and the options, and the fact that that conversation needs to happen. Other than that, you really probably want to just sit for a minute, give us a call. We'll get you scheduled so we can talk about some things, kind of point you in the direction of what maybe do you need to think about. There are a lot of families who already have, so I'm just going to speak legal and financial for a minute, okay? With my parents, we already have a person who's power of attorney and financial and healthcare power of attorney. We've already taken care of that. So if the diagnosis would pop up, we already have that piece done. So I think that you can come into this with different things, like maybe your loved one has already sold their home and they're living in an apartment, because there's always those pieces of, if we have to transition, what are we going to do? None of that needs to be done right that second. I think a lot of times what I see with our families is just reaching out for that education, because they don't know what to expect. They've heard about what's going to happen, but they don't really know, and they don't know how to plan, what to plan for, what are some things they need to think about. For me, it's always safety, and we probably ought to get started thinking about the financial house in order, because your person's living at home, it can be very expensive. They're living in memory care, it can be very expensive. So what are those plans? Again, nothing that needs to happen that second, because Mark, there's going to be some grief. There's going to be some period of, I just got this diagnosis. I need some time to process. I need some time to grieve. We don't really label it as grief, but it is. And so then how do we walk through that? How do we adjust to that? And what I love to tell people is, you do have to adjust and walk through it and accept and all that stuff, but you don't have to do it alone. There are people that can help you along that pathway. We'll help you figure out what you need to do. We'll help you build that village. We can help you with all of those pieces. So we're a good call to make. And then we can hook you up with other resources that you need. Maybe you need adult day respite services. Maybe you need some services through the area office on aging or home care. We'll get you started on that in those pathways.
So what I'm hearing, even though I'm afraid to call because you are going to make real what I suspect, which is why I'm afraid to call,
Right.
there's really empowerment on the other side of that phone call.
There certainly is, because it gives you an opportunity to direct and control and have some say and involve your loved one and get ahead of what's going to happen to you. Either way, you can educate yourself and be prepared, or not. Either way, it's going to happen. And yes, there is empowerment on the other side of that. There's going to be other things, but again, you'll have a friend in us to help you through that.